What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So New Zealand and Ireland have just finished their second test of the July internationals, and it went completely differently to how I was expecting it to go after watching that first game last week. So there's an awful lot to get through here, an awful lot of penalties. There was a bit of a slow game in terms of stop-starting. Not a great deal of scores to talk about. I mean, in terms of the full-time results, we've only ended up with 4 tries. This game completely different to last game, but so many penalties, so many cards, so many key areas to cover. So what we'll do is we'll chuck the first half on here for you guys, and we'll have a work through the first half. We'll move on to the second half, and we'll talk about our thoughts before and after each half. So starting off, the game started out almost exactly like it did last week. Ireland getting a very early try. This one coming in from Andrew Porter, only in the 3rd minute. It was pretty much the all-Ireland attack for that first 5 minutes or so, I'd probably say. There was a lovely little break from Tig Byrne, making a great little 40-metre dash down the line. 9 phases later, bit of Ireland taking their time, working the phases, go through some of those crash balls, some of those pick and goes, just wait for the gap to open up, and eventually it did for Andrew Porter just to get himself underneath the post there. Really nice from him, and Sexton managing to convert that. So Ireland, sort of like last week, taking that really early advantage, 7-0 up within the first 5 minutes, which was quite exciting to see. Exactly like we saw last week, the energy from Ireland incredibly high at the beginning of the game. In the 8th minute, we had a New Zealand penalty. Ireland players was holding on to someone back as the ball was kicked on. It was a bit of a silly penalty. We did go up for a New Zealand line-out. However, Ireland did manage to steal the line-out. And this was one of the things we'll be seeing throughout the game. Ireland line-out in this game was much better. Last week, I didn't really feel like either team was really beginning to dominate the set piece from what I can remember. With this week, Ireland definitely looked to be far more in control of that line-out, which was really nice to see. In the 12th minute, we see Ireland begin to extend their lead out, successfully converted by Johnny Sexton, getting a penalty. This was from New Zealand player not releasing the ball on the ground. To be fair, it was a huge double tackle coming in from Keelan Doris and Tig Byrne. They're 2 of the big tackle players and jackal players, to be fair, in that Ireland team. Really hard to deal with. So Sexton managing to take them to 10-0 just 12 minutes into the first half. In the 17th minute, there was a big decision made here. Now, Fainga Anaku going off with a yellow card. This was something that actually caused a bit of an injury to Hansen. He sort of cut above his eye. This was a bit of a breakaway from Hansen going down that right wing. Saw he was running out of room, so kicked the ball on, and Fainga Anaku managed to dive up for, I'm going to guess what he was going to claim was a charge down. Flew into midair from about 10 feet away, and landed shoulder straight into the head of Hansen. His elbow sort of hit Hansen in the chest, knocking him to the ground, just completely down on the ground. Now, this is probably one of the first controversial parts of this game. From an outside perspective, as a third party, not really backing either team in this one, I really feel like this should have been a red card. I feel like he came from deep. With pace, there was force coming in. He did leap into the air. I didn't really see him raise his hands to get the charge down at all. He then landed towards the player, facing the player, and led with the shoulder coming out from the air. The mitigation given was that the elbow hit the player's chest just before the shoulder hit the face. I feel like that's an incredibly slight mitigation in coming down on someone's shoulder first to the head. I don't know. I personally I think that could have been a red card. I think New Zealand will have got a little bit lucky with that one. I've seen in plenty of other games a red card would have been given from that one. So only a yellow card there, but it did allow Ireland to move up the field a bit and get on the attack. Now, over the course of this yellow card, there was another yellow card. This one going against Ofatuanga Fassi. This one was a bit of a weird one again, a bit controversial. There was a break made by Sexton down on that left wing. He had Ringrose on the inside, right on his shoulder, ready for the offload. Sexton goes to get tackled. He looks to do the offload to find that Ringrose has already been tackled to the ground. Tuanga Fassi making an early tackle on a man without a ball, and arguably, I think, stopping a try-scoring opportunity here. There was a real big call. Clearly, I think it was a very much a professional foul. He clearly knew if he didn't make that tackle off the ball, there was probably a good chance of it going to to be a try. So the yellow was awarded for the tackle off the ball and the stopping of the potential try. Now, again, here, I feel like this was a harsh call. I mean, and many Irish supporters and subscribers, I want to see what your thoughts in the comments are about these situations. For me, this was a penalty try. The mitigation for this one was that Geordie Barrett was within range to potentially chase down Ringrose. We're talking 5 metres from the try line. I think even if Geordie Barrett catches him there, more than likely Ringrose is going to go over for that try. We saw him last week literally outrunning wingers and getting round the outside and beating people in a much worse position. I really don't think that was very justified to say that wasn't a penalty try. I think if that ball gets offloaded, the only argument I would think is maybe was Sexton actually able to get the ball out? It looked to me on first glance like he looked and saw Ringrose already tackled and so held on to the ball as opposed to offloading to a tackle player. So I think Ireland will have felt hard done by there. So in this first half, there were an awful lot of cards going on. New Zealand at this point are down to 13 men. Ireland opt for the scrum. And actually begins to go well. They play for some phase attack. They are beginning to move towards that New Zealand try line. They decided out of all these penalties not to take the 3 points. But one thing that was clear in this is that Ireland were attacking so narrow. It was 13 on 15 players, and yet Ireland were playing these pods of 4, 5 men in diamond attack formations, moving forwards, completely mitigating you having these man advantages out on the wing, using all of your forwards in a really tight-knit attack. It's such a weird decision. I mean, when you've got 13 men, that is the time more than any to spread it wide. If anything, even if you're not going to be winning points or scoring anything, it at least tires your opponents out for later in the game. You know, it begins to make a bigger impact. So throughout all of this, actually, New Zealand actually managed to hold out. There were an awful lot of penalties conceded during it, but Ireland did actually not manage to score across those 2 yellow cards. This was ended off by New Zealand winning a penalty at the scrum, Andrew Porter collapsing, which was a shame. That sort of ended the Irish attack at that point. There was another card in this game coming in the 31st minute from Tarveo. A head collision with Gary Ringrose in open play. Red card directly. This one, I feel like I actually agree with that one as a red card. It was a bit harsh just because he was clearly trying to chase the player and Ringrose stepped inside and it was a head collision. But there was no dip from the player. It was an immediate sort of head-on-head collision. They cut both people's heads open. It was a big contact. Ringrose had to leave the field afterwards as well. I think by letter of the law, that one actually is a red card. You know, cut and dry. There's not a lot that can be done about that. We've seen far less tackles that just involve head-on-head ending up in red cards in previous games. So I think a red card is absolutely justified for that. I am surprised, though, that they would justify a red card for that and not for the Fainga Naku one. To me, it's basically the same thing. It's just a large impact to the head with force from distance. I don't know. For whatever reason, the referee didn't give the same thing there. But that means going in towards the end of the first half, we've just had Fainga Naku come back on and New Zealand back down to 13 players. Ireland kicked it across. They managed to get into the corner. They did manage to win their own line-out. The line-out was looking pretty solid. They got another penalty there for New Zealand jumping across in the line-out. New Zealand were just trying anything to hold on in this point now. New Zealand gave away another penalty then for collapsing this next one in a line-out. George Bower going down. Ireland got another penalty and this time decided to switch it up. They went for the scrum. There was a bit of issues around yellow cards and injuries for props and then having to do a uncontested scrum, but there's carded players. We sort of saw this. I can't remember what the game was. I feel like it was France versus Italy or something in the Six Nations. It's all a bit weird that an extra player has to come off, has to make these switches out for carded players when you've got injuries and stuff. So it began to get a little bit confusing. Ireland again on the strike play from the back of this scrum, 5 on 3 in terms of backs, and yet the narrow attack just didn't open the room. New Zealand actually defended well, and eventually James Lowe giving away a knock-on. So again, New Zealand managing to survive barely. What was looking like it was probably going to be a 10-0 half actually got switched up right at the end. In the 38th minute, we got to see a New Zealand penalty. This was, well, and a series of penalties. Take your pick. There was 5 penalties. The one that was eventually given was going to be against James Ryan for clearly just not rolling away after the tackle. James Ryan actually got awarded a yellow card in that 39th minute for just being the guy on the 5 metres for doing the 9th penalty in a row. So fortunate for him, but he was actually the culprit for 2 or 3 of them. So I think probably he was the one worthy of getting a yellow card there. But it did even up those numbers a little bit. We've just seen Tuanga Fassi get back onto the field, so we're both on 14 players each now. New Zealand go through a series of tap and goes, each one managing to be shut down by Ireland eventually, but more penalties conceded lead to more tap and goes. And eventually, just before that half-time whistle, we did see Beauden Barrett go over for a try. Initially did look like a knock-on. I thought it was a knock-on too, but on the replay, looks like the ball came off the foot of Beauden Barrett. Cheeky little grubber kick through by about a metre and dotted down. And Geordie Barrett managing to kick that one as well, just to even that up a little bit towards that half-time. 7-10. So quite a close game considering there's been 4 cards in this first half. A real tight-knit affair. I think Ireland will feel hard done by, though. I think there could have potentially been more. Like I said, I really think there could have been a red card for Fainga'anuku. I actually think there could have been a penalty try for the Tu'ungafasi tackle. So I think Ireland will feel a bit hard done by. They weren't in the lead more at half-time there. But in terms of notes, I had Ireland look on top. They're winning possession, territory, and visits to 22. All the stats hugely in favour of Ireland. They were winning the most majority of their lineouts, and there was an awful lot of cards for New Zealand. The only negative I had for them, the attack far too close together, not making the most of the man advantage, not managing to convert that into points. New Zealand are just not really building attack at this point. The only attack I will ever mention there is that one in the first half. It was the only one that really looked like it was getting going, was right at the end of the first half. They were a little bit too desperate, trying too many incredible things just to make something happen rather than just going through the phases. They actually looked better in the scrum, I would have said, out of the 2 teams in that first half. They definitely looked more on top. Even with a man down, they still looked like they were holding that scrum pretty well. And they just needed to hold on to the ball, work through the phases. Don't try these ridiculous passes out wide. Just try and move their way up the field. The second half then feels rather slight due to what happened in that first half. So much going on in that first half. Took an hour to complete the first 40 minutes, which was quite incredible. The second half kicked off an awfully slow first 10 minutes. No one really getting going, settling back into the game. In the 48th minute, we get to see another try come from Andrew Porter. Anyone picking a bet for Andrew Porter to score a try in both halves? You know, what a bet that would have been to come in. Bundyaki finding room on that outside now. The man advantage beginning to make its bit of an appearance due to some of the New Zealand players getting a bit tired on that wing. Bundyaki makes a fantastic bit of room around the outside. Tyg Byrne as well, doubling up, cutting on the inside, getting right up to that New Zealand try line. And then finally, there was just a couple of pick and goes, and eventually, what man do you want going over the line other than Andrew Porter from a pick and go situation? Another successful conversion. So 10 minutes into the second half, it's 17-7 to Ireland. They're beginning to extend that lead out a bit now. And then pretty much, I'm not going to lie, going from that point in the 48th minute all the way through to the 66th minute, so almost a 20-minute gap, it is just to and from and New Zealand penalties just being given away. In the 52nd minute, Ireland winning a penalty at the scrum, beginning to dominate the scrum now, driving New Zealand back there. In the 55th minute, there was a New Zealand player offside, which actually allowed Sexton to get his penalty, taking them to 20 points to 7. 59th minute, Ireland penalty in the scrum, New Zealand collapsing. So even the platform that New Zealand were managing to hold out in that first half, beginning to slip away from them a bit. In the 60th minute, New Zealand actually looked like they were going to be able to create something. Geordie Barrett making a lovely break down the inside, a superb tackle from Keelan Doris right on the ankles, just managing to stop him for what could have been potentially a really long-range try. The ball went wide to George Bower, again making lovely room for a big man, managing to cut through the line, made good distance, but then got tackled and didn't release the ball, so it led to another Ireland penalty there. It took 65 minutes into this game for Ireland to replace the front row, and that's a real big show of what this Ireland front row is capable of. So many new players coming on for that New Zealand, whether it be through cards or through injuries. They've replaced that front row a good number of times, and Ireland managed to hold out for 65 minutes and managing, even in the 65th minute, they were still being able to take charge of the scrums in that second half. So they'll be really happy with their performance overall. In the 66th minute, Ireland wanted to just extend it beyond the game, really. Now, a penalty kick from Sexton, taking it to 23 points to 7. That was just New Zealand tackling beyond the ruck. Again, so many of these penalties feel avoidable for New Zealand. Just getting a bit desperate for something to be created, which was a bit of a shame. 71st minute, Ireland penalty, New Zealand collapsing the maul. All these penalties were just compounded. New Zealand obviously struggling to deal with some of this the Ireland attack. Very nice to see the energy and the passion coming in from this Ireland team. Right at the end of the game, then we do actually have a bit of a switch up. There is a try coming in from Will Jordan, which was really nice to see. Came on quite late in that game. You want him to come on and score a try. Absolutely did the work. New Zealand on a good attack, going wide. Fakatava had come on at this point, and was making a huge improvement to the speed of the ball from the back of the ruck. Very, very impressive. I don't know a lot about him, but seeing him come on, taking over from Aaron Smith, big call, but the speed from the back of the ruck, much improved there. Managing to spread the ball out wide, there was a bit of a slip from James Lowe, which gave him just a bit too much room, but the ball went out wide, and Will Jordan just got such good pace, good finishing, managing to get himself over for the try. They did also have a couple of issues just before that. They'd had a couple of tries held up. Ireland defence doing what we saw New Zealand do last week, actually, managing to hold a couple of tries up, getting over the try line, just not getting that ball down. And then Geordie Barrett missing that Will Jordan conversion. So overall, it ended up being 23 points to 12 to Ireland in a game that I really wasn't expecting to go the way it did. So many cards, a bit of bad discipline actually from New Zealand in this one. And I actually feel the score could have been more outrageous. I mean, if you'd sort of gone along with what my opinions on it were, obviously I'm not a world-class ref, but if Fainga Naku had got that red card, you know, there would have been a couple of situations where he was making good ground later on in that game, where we wouldn't have seen it. We wouldn't have seen Will Jordan come on later. I think there should have been a penalty try for the Tuanga Fassi tackle, so there could have been another 7 there. I think this game could have actually been worse. I think they got a little bit unlucky, Ireland, with some of the calls in this game. But overall, I'd be very happy with that performance. It's the first win for a Northern Hemisphere team throughout these July internationals. And they looked in charge. They looked in charge for a good majority of the game. A lot of the New Zealand points coming in, just slips of concentration, and New Zealand will always capitalise on those points. So I think Ireland will be incredibly happy. The lineouts look solid. The defence looked way better from Ireland this week. I mean, there's still a couple of issues with penalties in terms of the defensive work, but on the line defence looking very good. So Ireland come away with a bit of a historic win, but I want to know what you guys thought of the game. Drop it down in the comments. How do you think the game went? Were you impressed by Ireland? I'd like to hear from the New Zealand and the Irish subscribers just to see what your thoughts on the game were. Of course, we're going to be trying to do these for as many of these games over the July internationals as we can. We've got Australia versus England about to kick off relatively soon from where I am. It'll probably have already been on by the time this video gets up, knowing my editing speed. So we'll look forward to doing a match report about that game as well. So make sure you are subscribed just to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. And if you enjoyed this one today, remember to leave it a like, because it does really help the channel out. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.